name is Abimbola Adeshi. I'm the managing director of the Data Pro. We have a friend here. Hey, go ahead.
My name is Igdia Kwata, Secretary of Administration of Association of Issuing Houses. I'm also Director at UCML Capital Limited.
My name is Oladide Adeoye, and I'm the Executive Director of Data Pro and also Chief Rating Officer for Data Pro. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Wens Morgan. I'm a member of the Data Pro Rating Committee.
My name is Victoria Balokon. I'm an analyst at Data Pro.
Okay. So thank you. We've invited everyone to unveil and seek your support regarding the webinar that we are hosting together with the Association of Issuing Houses next week, Thursday at 3 p.m. The rating theme is post-COVID economic recovery, credit rating imperatives for issuers and investors. Data Pro is one of the registered credit rating agencies in Nigeria and is in operation as a rating agency since 2004. It's always been part of our strategy to organize an event that will elevate the practice and the purposefulness and the thinking and about what we do as a rating agency and how it can contribute to economic development and how the different segments of the Nigerian economy can benefit from what we do. Unfortunately, it has taken us more than 10 years to get to this realization. But today, we are very happy that we are finally taking this initiative to do this. It's going to be an annual event going forward. And this year, we are also very privileged and very happy to be hosting this together with one of the trade groups. You understand, the capital market is made up of various stakeholders, the facilitators. So we have credit rating agencies. Then we have the issuing houses that we work together in some of these transactions, made up of mostly investment bank, merchant banks, and other key intermediaries. So they have their own association, which is the Association of Issuing Houses Nigeria. That is represented by Mr. Apata. So I'll give you a background. Just like I've said, Data Pro was actually started in 1995. And the major push, the major backing that we had then was that we had a franchise that we were able to secure from a company called Dun & Bradstreet in 1995. I don't know how old some of you are, but if you cast your back to the 90s, that was when this issue of fraud, 419, and the reputational crisis that we are still battling with as a country actually started. That was the beginning of the manifestation of all these 419 guys and the fraud and everything. And Nigeria had a very bad reputation. Our financial system was under very intense pressure to be able to come up with due diligence processes that will be in line with international best practice, because coincidentally, by 1989, the Group of Seven, which are the most developed countries, came up with what we call the Financial Action Task Force that now rolled out a major recommendation principles about to fight global crime, especially crimes that are associated with what we call money laundering. Okay, so from 1990, all countries in the world were supposed to put in place processes that we are witnesses today, where we have NFIU, where we have financial institutions have to report suspicious transactions. That started in 1990. But unfortunately, Nigeria did not embrace that system very early. So by the mid-90s, the gap became obvious because a lot of our banks, right, were not practicing those international measures. Not their fault anyway, because Nigeria did not have the enabling law. But most of the international banks operating in Europe and America had those laws that made it mandatory for banks to conduct what we call KYC, enhanced due diligence, that needed them to do due diligence on Nigerian companies that have transactions abroad. So Dun & Bradstreet is involved in credit rating, is involved in business information services. So they needed a Nigerian company that we represent them to be able to conduct due diligence and business information reports. And that was the concept we had when we started that up in 1995. So for the first 10 years, we were actually involved in what today is called compliance. But when we started, people really did not even understand what we were doing, but we started that compliance consulting in 1995. So in fact, we consider ourselves like a pioneer in that sector. So we started from the issue of compliance, right? And some of the modules that we were using, we were very fortunate that we were introduced to some of those best practices by Dun & Bradstreet. Like I said, Dun & Bradstreet is one of the first rating agencies, started more than 100 years ago in the US. Okay, so they have the culture, they have the methodology, and they've almost gone even digital by then. So we were very privileged to be involved in some of their internal processes, to understand some of those issues that we also needed to use for business information. So by 2004, I think there was a transaction that we had that necessitated credit rating. But because before you can be classified as a rating agency, it is a regulated industry. So we needed to approach SEC. Then I think it was only Augusto and GCR that were there then. So we became the third rating agency that was given that license in 2004. And since then, we've been doing a bit within the industry, but we believe we need to open up the perception about what credit rating agency is all about. A lot of times, people even confuse us with credit bureau. Like if you ask an average Nigerian, what we mentioned is the credit bureau that gives opinion about credit worthiness about individual. But the difference between the credit bureau and credit rating agency is that we deal with corporates, we deal with securities, we deal with government, we deal with municipalities. Right? We don't do with individuals. The credit bureaus deal with individuals. Okay. So that's just like the background. So the Association of Issuing Houses, just like I said, is a trade group in the capital market, and it comprises of issuing houses, and there's self-regulatory organization. So what are the objectives? Just like I mentioned, it's been thinking about this for a very long time. So increase the level of awareness, because if you understand the value proposition of credit rating agencies, which I'm going to mention shortly, we understand the key important role they play in the economy. For example, in America, the rating agencies are very key players, within the economy because of what we do to ensure there's liquidity in the capital market and efficient allocation of resources. Unfortunately, there is poor perception of what we do in Nigeria, but we think it's high time we do a lot of follow-up on this to be able to put what we do out there so that the larger percentage of Nigeria, because an average person is an investor. Everybody's looking at what they can be able to save for the rainy day and put, for you to be able to make decisions about very safe investment options, you need to understand what rating agencies do, because part of your consideration before you make investment, especially investment that has to do within the money and the financial market, it has to do with the kind of opinion, the kind of service that we provide. So we believe this webinar that we are doing together with the AIHN, we bring about important perspectives that we can use going to the new normal. We need to move on with our lives after COVID. COVID led to a lot of economic disruptions, and government needed to intervene. There has been a lot of palliative, a lot of intervention measures that have been put in place so that the economy and the players will not really suffer very irreparable loss. So you've seen the central bank has done a lot in terms of making sure that a lot of the manufacturing companies, especially those that do with pharmaceuticals and those that support the health industry, are alive. And even the aviation benefited from it. So, and the government is winding up some of those palliatives now because we need to now learn how to live after COVID. Right? But there has been disruptions, so we need to understand what can the credit rating agencies do to be able to make sure that the funding and the capital that is needed for the manufacturing companies, right, is available out there, because government is not going to continue that interventionist approach. We also need to also move forward in terms of the medium the small and medium-sized enterprises, in terms of understanding how the credit rating agency can also help them access capital. You understand the greater percentage of our economy is also within that sector, and there is a lot of funding that is needed for these micro and small medium enterprises. So we have a lot of developmental banks that have established BOI, DBN to fund this. But there are certain procedures, there are certain criteria they need to fulfill, right, before they can access some of this funding. So the rating agency will also play a very crucial role in making sure that we can give opinion about the fundamentals of some of those medium and small enterprises to enable them to access the market. We're also thinking that for a very long time, the market for what we call unsolicited rating is very poor in Nigeria. What we've actually been doing is solicited. That means it's only when it becomes a regulatory obligation when this is what you need to do by law, right? Because some of what we do too, right, especially for institutional investors, for example, the pension funds, they cannot invest money in certain securities that have ratings that is not investment grade. Okay, so some of them, their hands are tied. So before you can put some of your instruments in the market or securities, you need to have that rating to be sure that it's investment grade. Okay, so that's why a lot of times there is solicitation. People come to us, corporate governments, like government cannot, the state government cannot issue bond, for example, without being rated to know that they have the ability to pay back. And so a lot of times it's from the solicitation market that people coming forward, right? But we also believe there is a lot of potentials in which you can, for example, on our website, you can, what we are planning is that with time you can go and look at the ratings of all, for example, all the microfinance companies in Nigeria. That we've been able to use some tools to rate them, even though they did not come forward. But there are tools that we can use to be able to guide investors or to be able to guide them to also assess the market. So we are also going to be looking at that. And we're also going to use the opportunity next week to unveil our new look. We design our rating report in line with the realities, and also to be able to introduce some of the new technologies, because rating is becoming more sophisticated and more scientific. So there are a lot of innovations using algorithms, using artificial intelligence that we want to make sure that our ratings are very transparent, because they are key critical issues that guide what we do in the industry: transparency, integrity, and these are very key issues, because whatever ratings and whatever grade that we give to any instruments should be comparable to any other rating, right? And we don't expect that there is going to be any difference between even what any rating agencies will give, because rating is more of a scientific than a qualitative opinion. So we're also going to unveil some of those new technologies that we are using. Okay, so to put in perspective, we expect investors to also join, because just like I mentioned, to an average investor, you need a scientific, or you need an unbiased opinion. Okay, so part of what we do as a rating agency, in fact, you can consider to the investor, a rating agency is like an information company. Okay, if you understand how the capital market works, there is what we call information asymmetry. That means the issuer, for example, or the corporate within the market that wants to either offer a debt instrument or even an equity instrument, right, has certain information that is not available to the investing public. Okay, so it behoves on rating agencies to be able to process that information and make sure that that information is available to that investor to make that rational decision. So it's very, very important that increasingly a lot of Nigerians understand that value proposition of the rating agency as a guide, right, for making investment decisions. You know, for the institutional investors like the pension operators, they can afford to have in-house analysts that could do some of those jobs for them. But for an average, you and I on the street, right, that does not have that expertise, mostly they rely on what the rating agencies do to be able to make that decision. We also expect institutional investors like the pension fund and to be able to also be part, and the banks and all the other financial intermediaries, because they also use what we do in some of the decisions we make. Then the issuers, right, and those, especially those members of the investment banking community, right? The rating agency will play a very crucial role in whatever they do, because one, like I've said, some of the things that they needed to do is regulated to be rated. Okay, so, and it's very important that also when it comes to the issue of pricing, in terms of what price some of those investments are taken to the market, at what price are they being sold, the rating agencies also play a very crucial role in that. So other intermediaries within the market, brokers and dealers, and you know the capital market is made up excessively of the brokers and dealers. Rating, they also use rating to monitor some of the exposure so that they know when to sell, when to buy, and also be able to make very informed decisions. So generally, the economy, as I said, the rating agency will play a very crucial role in making sure there is efficient allocation of resources, there's liquidity, because essentially we have people that have money and they want to put it in the instrument that will lead to fixed income and fixed returns. So it's very important that the rating agencies are available to be able to guide everybody and promote economic growth. So on Wednesday, we expect by 3 p.m. that the webinar is going to be live. So part of why we are also inviting you guys is to be able to get your details so that we can give you the link. The link will be shared on Wednesday. We want you to join the live session and be able to report, right, going forward on that. And we also will want to build a very robust relationship with you guys going forward, right? So that you can help us in our goal of popularizing the rating, credit rating industry. We're making sure that Nigerians can actually gain and they can be able to use the work that we do for their own economic benefits, and also that the country as a whole can grow and develop through the instrumentality of what we do. So we have our guys, client services manager, and some of our analysts will engage you after this to be sure that you get your correct details, please. And we will follow up to make sure that we can build that community of reporters that are well versed in credit rating as an aspect of the capital market, right? And together work to make sure that the value added and the services that has made great countries develop, we can replicate it here too. So the welcome address will be given by the CEO of the FMB, Mr. Bola Modeli. We must confess that the coming on stream of the FMB has helped tremendously. It has given us a lot of support, because if you understand how the capital market was structured before FMB, it was only the equity market that was available. That means you have to sell shares, right? But what the FMDQ introduced is the debt market, which is becoming very, very big, right? And that has actually changed fundamentals, that changed momentum. It's bringing a lot of dynamism, it's bringing a lot of lot of innovation and a lot of new capital to the market. So it's a very welcome development, and we need to also support that. So we've invited Coco as his founding committee, the CEO of FMDP, and he's going to be making a speech on the topic. And then we are going to have some good messages. We expect that our regulator SEC also make some comments, and the Debt Management Office and the Nigerian Stock Exchange, which is called NGX regulation. Then we expect other special guests. Then we now go to the panel discussion, which is going to be on this topic, which is imperatives post-economic recovery for issuers and investors. And it's going to be anchored by the chairman of the Association of Union Houses, Mr. Chioke. And we have panelists, one for the banking sector, represented by the ED from Nova, and also want to look at from the private sector. It's represented by the ED who are will be following the market, who actually issued one of the biggest bonds in the history of Nigeria recently. So we're going to be talking. Then we have our chief rating officer that's going to also join them to be able to look at how the market performed, what are the potentials going forward, what are the opportunities, what are the risks, and everybody will be able to chart the course going forward, for especially the debt market. We also, like I said, we launch our new look at how we are trying to use new technology to develop. So the outlook looks very good. We increasingly going to be using technology, because the more we use technology, the more we can be able to be very, very reduce the margin of error. The more there is less of human intervention, then we'll be able to also increase our speed. We want to make sure that all our back end, to the end of our processes, is paperless, and also using the new technologies of machine learning. We want to make sure that we can transit to that fintech rating agency. That's what we want to be known going forward as the first fintech rating agency in Nigeria. Yeah, so embrace that, because this is the age of new technologies, and everybody's using technologies, not only within the banking industry. You can see what the fintech are giving the banks with their own. They're very efficient, and they don't need too much by, but they've been able to even just one product of the bank, which is lending. You can see how they dramatically been able to revolutionize that sector. So we want to make sure that we can use technology to also broaden the work that the rating agencies can do, especially when it comes to those that call your solicited rating, and we can move forward there. So the target audience, we expect that virtually all the capital market operators will be attendants, investors, mutual funds operation, the deposit money banks, merchant banks, development banks, even who have accredited guarantee agencies, insurance, and the gentlemen and ladies of the press. So thank you very much. We've given you a copy of what I've just gone through. I will leave it to my brother here, Gail, and our ED to take it from.
That's a very good presentation. Thank you, sir. Association of Issuing Houses is the trade group of the issuing houses in Nigeria. Issuing houses are what are sometimes termed investment banks. There are currently a bit over 100 issuing house licenses in Nigeria. Most of them are members of Association Issuing Houses. We're very happy to partner with Data Pro for this webinar. Again, if you look at the market of recent, most of the activity in the market is in the debt side rather than equity. And you cannot do a debt transaction without at least one or two ratings. And so that is where Data Pro is a very critical part of that ecosystem, because without their ratings, you really cannot do any significant transaction. So we're happy to be here, and hopefully we can answer any questions you have. Thank you.
All right. I want to say that much has been said. It is just for me to say welcome, and we will be very much open to further clarification based on what you have done so far. Thank you.
Dr. Wentz?
Yeah, thank you very much for coming. I believe that the background has already been laid, and it is important that given the new normal, that Nigeria, of course, needs to move on, develop the economy, grow it for the betterment of everyone. Thank you.
So you take your questions about what we do, because sometimes, like I said, it's still a new field to a lot of us.
Sir,
Yes.
we talked about the webinar on Wednesday,
on Thursday. Wednesday is when we are sharing the link
Okay.
to you guys. So please, so if by close of business on Wednesday you still don't have that link, you need to call one of our guys to give you that link. But we want you to be part of that webinar. But you know, because of cyber security and things like that, we need to be very careful about some of these things. But this is just an introductory session with you guys. When you attend the event proper, then you will further get clarity about the value proposition of what we do, how the credit rating agency is very important. Mr. Apata said, in terms of the debt market, making liquidity.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So coming to the new normal now.
Yeah.
Since inception of the rating house, Data Pro,
Yeah.
has government done enough in terms of encouragement, the rating house, and also trying to increase their bottom line in terms of collaboration?
Okay. Thank you. What's your name?
Yusuf Abdullah.
Okay, Yusuf. The purpose of government is to put the enabling environment there, you know, and I think all over the world, government is trying to be private sector led in the economy. So, in terms of what the government has done, the enabling law is there, the platform and the ecosystem for registration is there, right? And from what has happened to FMDQ the past 5 years, the growth, right, is an indication of the support that the government has given. Okay, so I think it's a win-win for government, because it has dramatically changed the dynamics of the market and in terms of access to funding, move venture capital, with lots of foreign direct investments. It's actually needed for this market. So we have private debt market too, which are also blossom because of some of the things that we do. So we believe as an entity that the private sector has a lot to do, right, in developing the country, right? The government should focus more on security, focus more on the basic infrastructure like electricity and good roads and things like that, which I believe they are backing it, and you already know the scope on that.
Right. So, what's the difference
Sorry, your name?
Desmond from Business Day.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so I heard you mention that you're hoping that the event will be annual.
Yes.
But you didn't say whether it's maiden edition or you've done something in the past. So I just want to make it the maiden edition.
Okay, this is the maiden edition. What as I said is that we've been playing with this idea for quite sometime more than 10 years. Right? Having understood that there is positive of knowledge of what we do, right? But with the coming on stream of the FM, every day now, every other day, at least when you pick up newspaper, you will receive one bond be issued and one statement from the meeting house. So we need to increase that tempo so that everybody can benefit from the value proposition of what we do. Because if you understand, like I said, in countries like America, the rating agency is considered after government, right? Even before banks, they are considered very vital for the development of the economy. Because everybody, actually every facilitator, every intermediary, every player within the capital and you know the economy is driven by the market. You can't play in that market without rating agencies. So that's the kind of model that we're looking at in revitalizing the market so that people can have trust and know that it's not only shares you can invest, you can even invest in bonds and be able, and those ones are even a bit fixed income securities, and you can be sure that this another 5 years, this is what you are getting another 3 years, and you can even hedge it against inflation to know prices going up. So there's a lot of dynamics that gives you better return because on the equity market, it's what the shareholders, the dividend that is declared. Sometimes they will tell you there's no dividend, right? But the bonds will give you a better and more secure return because they need to honor the application. And we are there to be able to make sure that we can give you that information that will be able for you to manage your portfolio.
Gloria from the Guardian newspaper.
Okay.
You mentioned the role credit agencies will play for easy access of the COVID-19 intervention fund for SMEs. So I want to ask how you intend going about it since the government is about ramping up the.
Okay, so what I said is that government needed to intervene during COVID so that the economy does not collapse. And they've done that job for almost 16 months now. They are rounding up and winding down. So if you have businesses that are still struggling, they still need some level of funding, right? They need capital to continue. Government is not handing over, those handouts are dry. So the options for them is to be able to borrow.
The businesses complain of bureaucratic processes in accessing the funds. So what role do you want to play? How do you think?
Okay, we've moved past the fund. The fund is already gone there. We are looking forward now. That's why it's post-COVID. You understand? The fund is gone. We are not involved in the fund. The government was just using its own metrics and giving to people and giving to people who are not involved. We are now looking at government has stopped Father Christmas, and sorry to use that language, not Father Christmas, because it's needed. Don't use that word. Government is because it's needed, that intervention, because things will have been worse. So they've done very well in giving that bailout. But going forward, right, how can people survive without bailout? Because there are ways in which you can borrow money, right? So it depends on you now to say, okay, this money is not free money. If you borrow, then you have to pay. Okay, so those that have very correct fundamentals, right, you can be able to, because the rating will show whether you have that ability to pay. And it's not that you must at once get to that position of being able to attract investment. But even if you don't, for example, make a triple B, which is the minimum investment grade, the rating also shows you your strengths and your weaknesses, what you need to do to get to a certain level. So for the SMEs, it's important for them to understand the rating, to be able to correct the internal processes and put them on a sustainable, because the rating makes sure that you are on a sustainable level in terms of your operations, in terms of your cash flow, because ratings look at liquidity, we look at cash flow to be able to make sure that are you going to pay this money you have borrowed. So it enables you to have that self-discipline, okay? Because the rating is, we are like an umpire, like a doctor that tells you, right, what you need to do, right? We are not looking at diagnosis, but it's a prognosis of telling you this is what is actually wrong, this is what you need to fix, and this is the way forward. So everybody needs, every corporate needs a rating agency. Even if you are not doing investment, you are not issuing anything, you need to be able to every year to understand from an impartial arbiter to tell you that you are not doing very well, your capital is due quickly. If you don't show it up, because even there are regulations, for example, that banks must meet minimum capital requirement, right? And to affect your rating going up.
So, there's this, my name is Victoria Ojuman, I write for Daily Independent. There's this issue that the country has been facing for quite some time, cyber crime among Nigerian youth, not only youth, I think among adults. So, do you think the government is doing enough in checking this? And if not, what are the measures to put in place?
But it's not an expert in cyber security, so you can use prayer. This is cyber security. Cyber security is everybody's business. Okay? So you can't blame government for you giving your security code to somebody to go and help you draw money. You can't blame government if you are scammed. If you wake up and somebody calls you that is your cousin, and you can understand that your cousin's voice is different from this person's cousin, but he's using his phone and he's asking that he has an accident and that he should send money to him, and send money to him, and you are blaming government if he's scammed. So we need to understand certain things. Cybersecurity is an individual responsibility. Right? Government essentially just gives the enabling environment. And that's what they do. Okay? So once the laws, and we have so many laws on cybersecurity. Have you read the Nigeria Cybersecurity Act? Go and read it. Then you see. Thank you.
For you, sir.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that most market activities are in debt, on the debt side instead of equity. So what is the way forward? What should be done? When you were giving a brief, you said that markets now on the debt side.
What I meant was primary market activity, yes,
Okay.
on the debt side. So again, that's a very long, complicated thing to answer. But the first thing to bear in mind is that in all markets, the debt market is way bigger than the equity market. That's the first thing to bear in mind. So if you look at the statistics on the FMD trading statistics, NSC, you notice that it's way bigger. So that's the first thing. In terms of primary market for equity, you need a booming economy to be able to sell equities in the primary market. And the economy is definitely not booming. So it's not a surprise that if anybody comes to the market and says they're doing public offer, if it's not MTN, it's anybody else, it will be difficult for them to sell because the economy is not doing well. And so you cannot expect the equity market to do much better than the economy.
Is it looking to get better anytime soon, considering the fact that we're approaching an election year?
Your guess is as good as mine. What normally happens around election year is to equity market in this country. So probably not, but again, I can't predict.
Any forecast in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
For what?
Next 5 years.
Focus on what?
On the health of the market.
Which market?
Debt market.
No, we have to be specific because you heard what the CEO said. Many people use the term capital market in Nigeria to mean equity market. It's totally wrong. Right? You have a debt market, you have an equity market. They are totally different markets. Right? The debt market is going to keep getting larger. for two reasons. One, the federal government keeps borrowing exponentially, so the amount of outstanding federal government debt is going to keep getting more. So if you go on FMDQ and you look at market capitalization, that number keeps growing. Corporates have to borrow, and rather than borrowing from banks, they should borrow directly from investors, and that's going to continue. So you heard the CEO talk about the largest corporate bond in Nigerian history, Boa Cement, last year, 115 billion. Later, was listed agency on that. I expect that at some point, another corporate will issue more than 115 billion. MTN did 110 billion this year. At some point, somebody will do more than that, because it makes sense to borrow from the market rather than the bank, because it's cheaper and you can fix your rate rather than bank that will always reprice.
But again, if we look at the space of borrowing on the government side, it's not looking like it's going to come down. I mean, what would be your recommendations? I mean, you guys say it's good to borrow, but if you look at the economy, right, the Nigerian economy, especially government spending on borrowing, and it doesn't look healthy, and it's not looking like it's going to get better anytime soon. What would be your recommendations?
Well, I think the borrowing problem in Nigeria is really more political than an economic thing, because again, historically, if you look at the previous governments, they do not believe in borrowing, they believe in paying down debt. You have a government that has to kind of philosophy. It all depends on what the philosophy of the government is, but in terms of the level of borrowing, yes, you're right, it's not going to reduce anytime soon. Just even the budget that was put out now, clearly the borrowing will continue. Not only is the borrowing going to continue, but the gap between actual and projected revenue gap. So people just see the borrowing and the project, they don't see what actually happens if you look back at the prior year. So there's a huge gap between how much government spends and how much they make. And until something drastic happens, higher taxes is the most likely outcome. Oil can no more build government out. It used to in the past. So where else can they get money from? They'll tax people more.
Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.